everybody, welcome to another edition of Liam's Hockey. Yeah, a little bit of a delay between today's show and the last one. Been a hectic time, lots going on the home front here, but pleased to be joining you again today, and of course each and every show brought to you by our title sponsor, Hosie and Brown, my dear friend Rod Brown, and we do have another garage that we're just tilt that up just a bit there. That will be promoting today. It'll be AAA Cav Tech Automotive. Donnie Kavanaugh. Boy, the St. Pius, the 10th connection just is ringing true today. We'll have more on them a little bit later. Got to bang one out for you here. Of course, our shot will be brought to you by Ad Seal Services. A shot of whiskey, our Irish toast. Be some birthday celebrations today, 3 in particular. 2 that are still with us. 1 in poor health, and a gentleman who passed away a long time ago. So we'll have that for you a little bit later. And I don't have the t-shirt for Ottawa Valley Uniform today. I'm just getting the scoop from Kevin Jardine as to what he's got for inventory. Because we've got a shirt lined up for Dougie Gillis, got one lined up for Dave Woolley, one lined up for Donnie Miller, and more on that in later shows as well. But that's the Bar Tavern t-shirt that I promoted last time. First and foremost here, let's get after it. All right. Hot topics, obviously there's nothing bigger than what's transpired with Tim Peel. Everybody's familiar with the scenario. Referee summarily dismissed. In kind of interesting wording, Colin Campbell not coming out and saying, "You're fired," but saying that you will not officiate again this season. And even though he was scheduled to retire this year anyway. So I'm not quite sure, a little bit ambiguous on the wording, if that has any further ramifications in terms of how Tim Peel actually files his retirement papers or whatever. I don't know. Bottom line is, he was fired. And bottom line is, rightfully so. I think the big concern or cause that came out of all of the commentary yesterday, made by, whether you want to call it people in the know, certainly some former officials chimed in, Paul Stewart, Kerry Fraser on Twitter, among others. Numerous media types. I certainly threw a couple of comments up myself. But the general cause of concern seemed to be integrity, based on the fact that the NHL is on the verge of stepping into a much wider scale in terms of in-game and on-game gambling. And with the open mic that was heard, and the utterance from Tim Peel that he basically called a fraudulent penalty on Nashville and deliberately wanted to do so, that affects the temerity, the integrity, what have you, of the game. You can say all the things you want about Nashville not going to make the playoffs anyway, Nashville this, Nashville that, early in the game, late in the game, the whole 9 yards. That seemed to be the general consensus, and I agree with that. Here's the only addendum I want to make, and the point I was trying to stress yesterday, and I followed it up with, I think, what was the perfect analogy. The mic'd George Laraque fight with Ivanens of Los Angeles from 2006. When something we knew had been happening for several decades, the arranged, staged fight in the NHL. Remember, the appetite for fighting was starting to wane. Not from hardcore, I don't call purists, but old-timers anyway, people like myself, been around the game for decades, that always want fighting a part of the game. The next tier down, those fans were saying, hey, enough is enough. Everybody was pointing, a lot of people were pointing to the Vinny LeCavalier-Jerome McGinley fight from the 2004 Stanley Cup Final is something that we never really want to see out of the game. If we want to see those two guys have a disagreement, drop the gloves, we still want them to be able to play in the game. So don't ever make the penalties punitive enough that they would be kicked out. But when Laraque and Ivanens set it up, and then Laraque says to him, good luck, and they drop the gloves and they have their goal, that opened up a can of worms, because then it was public for all of the rest, minions and negatives, contrarians, and just people who just hate the sport anyway and would look for any window, much like the Don Cherry protagonists a year and change ago in November when he was dismissed. The fringe fans So the fringe fans were able to jump on fighting. Look at this, barbaric, staged. It's pugilism on ice, got nothing to do with hockey. And you just fast forward a couple years after that with George Peros and Colt Knorr, that ended so badly for Peros, and that really put the final stamp. And now the rules on fighting at the end of a game, the rules on instigating, the rules on how everything is judged and viewed and officiated now in regards to fighting. Not that it's changed dramatically, but a lot of it began, in my view, with George Laraque being mic'd and his comments going public. This is what happened a couple days ago with Tim Peel. Unbeknownst to him, or maybe he knew, he was mic'd. And he said what he said. And you can't do that, even though we've known for years. So some of the argument yesterday on Twitter, anyway, the primary site that I hang my hat on for commentary on this, although I don't think it was probably different in most places, was that everyone was saying, look, this has gone on for years. We accept this as part of the game. If there's been 3 penalties against Toronto when they're playing Montreal, you know the next one's going against Montreal. It's just the way it's been. Well, does that mean we have to accept it? Look, I'm a long-time hardcore fan. I don't accept that. I don't want that in my game. If Toronto deserves 5 straight penalties, call 5 straight penalties. If there's a deserved penalty in the last minute of play of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, then call the penalty. We've seen it before. Look at the late call on Andrew Ferrin, speaking of 2004. See that cat going? You must have heard him. That's my mom's cat. He's living with us here now, too. Anyway, Andrew Ferrin's got a penalty right at the end of the 2004 Stanley Cup Final, Game 7. You know what? He deserved it. We don't see it all the time, but I think that's what I, for one, would want in the game. I would like that in the game. And my context of my messaging yesterday was that hopefully the NHL can use this open window now to review officiating, which has gotten progressively worse for the last 20 years, specifically since 2013, the last lockout. And in particular, these 2 forays here under COVID conditions, for whatever reason. Continual games, the same teams, same crews, I don't know. You know, I hate the 2-ref system anyway, but I know it's here to stay. But regardless, my conjecture, or not my conjecture, but my hope yesterday when the news came that he was being dismissed by the NHL, that they could use this in this offseason has an impetus for a new directive, and collectively a new thought process that would be implemented has a new way of calling the games, where let's manage the game. Of course, you want to continue to be on top of a game as an official. By the way, I was an official. Yeah, I did it years ago. I did it as a kid. It's nowhere even near the same boat. But that differentiates me from 99% of all of you as well, including a lot in the media. It's an unbelievably thankless task. It was 40 years ago. It was 80 years ago. And it is today. The fact remains is that we all want the game officiated as best as they can, as human beings can. Video review, eyes in the sky, electronics have changed that to a large degree, and they continue to work on simple things, as we've seen with the offside. Skate in the air on the line is now a good goal. Now you get a penalty if you get the wrong call. These new things have come in the last 12 to 24 months. These are good moves. But in respect to how the game is called on the ice by the 2 men in stripes, and the penalties that are allowed to be called by the linesman, that's not really up for debate here. It's really the guys in the red stripes. Let's see now a new directive where let's take that out of the game. That penalty on Nashville was ridiculous, regardless of the fact it was to a team that's not going to make the playoffs. That cannot be part of the game. That should never be part of the game. What point of that does anybody not understand? I just could not believe some of the commentary yesterday, at least as I said, on the one platform that of the many that are out there on social media to check. And I'm sure there's commentary on all of them. But I just could not believe some of the commentary of that. That was too harsh on Tim Peel. It's the way it's always been. We get it. They're managing the game. No! Why is anybody accepting that? This was the same door that opened that it did on the referendum that happened over the next couple of years on fighting in hockey after Larac and Ivanins. And Larac was mic'd up. And now, stage fights are all but gone. They're not fully eliminated. Saw that in San Jose's game the other day. They fined Gabriel $3,000 for his cross-check there in the pregame warm-up. And look, the guy's played 10, 11 games. He doesn't have a goal or an assist. He's got 35, 40 penalty minutes. He's not long for the NHL. God love the kid, his enthusiasm and his will and his drive and his want to go. I know those other guys would probably do the same. But the fact remains is you can't carry those guys anymore on a team that wants to play in the NHL. Nor should we be carrying any more officials who are simply out there doing what has been the norm. I'm not saying these are renegade refs. They're doing what has been the norm in hockey the world over. Let's take this opportunity to have a new directive, a new viewpoint, a new guideline, and take out the made-up calls out of the game. Why manage the game in that vein? Manage the game as we're now so able to hear with the referees because there's virtually no fans in the building. I was watching all sorts of hockey last night. You could hear the refs yelling. Maybe I'm more in tune with it now because of the last 24 to 48 hours. You hear the refs yelling all over the place last night. Telling guys in scrums, telling guys in plays along the boards what to do, keep the play going. Hey, you got one there, move the puck, roll off, this, that, and everything else. That's how you manage the game. You got to call. You see a call it. If you got to call 2 penalties on the same play, call it. Put the team down 5-on-3. Don't think it's a bad thing to do. Screw them. They're the ones that committed the 2 fouls. Call it. If it was a penalty in the last minute of the game, of a tight game between 2 teams and they're fighting for first place, call it. Who as a fan doesn't want that? I want that as a fan. And the last thing I'll say on it, the things we want out, if they could do this new cleansing this summer, is get rid of the ticky-tack bullshit. The stuff where the little tap, like that call that Peel made. Tell me who didn't roll, just went, oh my God, are you kidding me right now? No one would have had the foresight to think he's managing the game till his mic gave him away at that point. As much as some people may have thought of it. But the ticky-tack calls. And if any of them are being made as make-up calls or calls because an official thinks they're managing the game, get that crap out. That's what you need to meet about this summer. And show all the examples. Because they're every game. And try and get rid of those. Look, this isn't going to happen overnight. It isn't going to happen. It's possibly going to affect this year's playoffs, such as they are and may be and will be, God willing. But going forward, I believe that what happened 2 days ago is an opportunity. And I hope that the league jumps on it, much like they did on fighting, and we still have the ability in the National Hockey League to have 2 guys drop the gloves and go at it. And I haven't checked the stats recently. I know fighting's up marginally, as you would expect, because you're getting nothing but rivalry games. Every game's a 4-pointer. Yes, a bunch of teams in all the divisions are out of the playoffs or soon to be, but you've got a much heightened awareness of your opponent, which is familiarity breeds contempt. And so you're going to have some scraps. And that's what's going on. And there's been a little bit more fighting in that regard. But let's be honest, folks. The bench clearing brawls have long been done. We haven't seen a line brawl in years. The stage fights are all but gone. And the pure enforcer is all but gone. So Curtis Gabriel here trying to make a foothold in San Jose. Believe me, the odds of him being there next year are slim and none. And I mean, he's got to put up some numbers. He cannot just go out and be a scrapper. As much as I admire and respect those guys and have my entire life and always will, anybody who drops a glove in any scenario, gloves in any scenario, but particularly those who rush to players, to teammates' aids. And these days, the bottom line is that simply isn't a role necessarily for an enforcer anymore. It can be anybody on your roster, really, and it just has to be somebody who has even not necessarily the ability, but the want to step in for a teammate. And that's as commendable as anybody that did it back in the day who did it primarily as an enforcer, in an enforcer role. So that's enough. I totally agree with Tim Peel's dismissal. Never really liked him as an official anyway. That shouldn't matter. I guess didn't really need to mention that, but I did. Too late. It's out there now. And look, he was retiring. There'll be no tag days for the guy. He's had a great career, longevity-wise. And I'm sure he's taking care of himself. And I hope he has a long and healthy life. And it's a black mark on him going out. But I think of, I'm going to screw this up probably because I'm jumping sports here. But I believe I think of one of the most famous soccer players in the world. I believe his last name is Zidane. Have I said that right? In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was most recently coaching in Montreal. What about the last game, the last moment of his professional career, if I'm not mistaken, was a red card because he headbutted an opponent, if I'm not mistaken. One of the most decorated, well-documented soccer careers. I mean, I don't think he's Pele, and I don't think he's a couple of these two superstars that are playing today. I profess to know nothing about the sport. But I do recall that because I think the guy said something about his sister, if I'm not mistaken, right? If I got the story right. So, you know, they don't fight in soccer. And so he went up and headbutted him. I think it was his last game ever. So, I don't know. Does anybody really care about that today? I don't think so. Ask pure soccer fans. I don't. I'd have to ask AJ Jakubek, I guess, and see. But I don't think this will be too much of a black mark on Tim Peel when it's all said and done years from now when he's sitting around his favorite watering hole. You know, he'll probably say, I got caught doing something that every single official, going back to Red's story. That's the other interesting thing. When I made my posts on Twitter, I put a picture of Red's story. I was wondering, is anybody going to pick up on that? Red Story may be one of the most famous names in officiating, NHL officiating history. And he only lasted 7 years on the job. He quit because he was called out by the president of the NHL, Clarence Campbell, for not calling a penalty on Junior Langlois of the Montreal Canadiens, who purportedly tripped Bobby Hull. And Clarence Campbell called Red out in so many words publicly on that. And Clarence Campbell said, I don't have the backing of the president of the NHL. I'm working for the NHL. Screw you. And according to Red, and he told me this to my face, he said Clarence Campbell called him and said, I'd like you to reconsider because you're making a mistake. You're nothing without the NHL. You were, you had some football heroics in a Grey Cup game. You set a couple records. You can barely skate. We gave you a job. And now you're turning your back on us because I said something about you. Boo-hoo. You'll never amount to anything without the NHL. And he said he told Clarence Campbell to go F himself. And he went on to have one of the most successful off-ice careers you could possibly have. When you talk about the rubber chicken circuit, and I know all about it, I've been doing it myself for close to 40 years. And he was one of the first guys to make a substantial living going coast to coast in Canada and later the United States until the day he died. Roy Red Story. His first name was Roy. Interesting. I put his picture. Nobody picked up on that he went out under very, not dubious, but very controversial circumstances in 1959. He also was responsible for one of the greatest hockey quotes of all time as well. Back to the ice. Sorry, digress. But when he said about Rocket Richard, he said, Liam, and he said this to hundreds, not just me, but he did say it to me. He said, that man, Maurice the Rocket Richard, was put on this earth to do one thing and one thing only, and that's score goals. You need a goal scored in a period, in a game, in a series, in a season. to win a Stanley Cup, to win anything, you want Maurice the Rocket Richard. That's Red Story's quote. Anyway, that's enough on Tim Peel. Let's move along, try and scoot along here. I want to talk about the Montreal Canadiens and their COVID situation. So what was announced today, today being March 25th, by Marc Bergevin, general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, that one of the two Canadians that are in COVID protocol, in fact, did test positive. Not once, but 2 other times, so he does definitely have it. He didn't say if it was Kotkaniemi or Armia, but it's one of the two. Guess we'll find out Monday, Tuesday, whenever they're scheduled to play, as of right now, their next game, because I would assume that that player will not have gone through enough quarantine to be given the green light, whereas the other one, through COVID protocol, because of contact tracing, should be able to play. So the reason that the Canadian games were canceled, and other teams who have had players put on COVID protocol and went ahead and played their games, is because the Montreal player did test positive. So the contact tracing, because it takes a number of days in some cases for COVID to actually be proven as a positive result, the Canadiens, the NHL, and the Montreal Canadiens did not want to take the chance playing against the Edmonton Oilers, not once, but twice, but 3 times this week, when at any point in any one of the days of this week, today, tomorrow, yesterday, any other number of players could have then be shown to be positive. And they would have already played? The Oilers? No, they did the right thing. That's why the Canadiens didn't play the games. A bunch of haters, of course, trolling the Habs online, saying, you think Gary Bettman and the NHL are going to turn around and give the Habs any breaks? You kidding me? They're not doing that. They did the right thing. That was a smart thing. That was the medically prudent thing to do. So that's why the Canadiens didn't play. Last topic here before we get on to toast to the birthday boys. And, of course, the garage, AAA, CavTech, Automotive. Have that on in just a second. But the Ottawa Senators, man, I'll tell you what, they got points in, 5-6 games? I mean, they're not out yet, but they're hanging around and making life interesting. But regardless of what they're doing for themselves, it's what they're doing to the rest of the North Division. And, I said at the outset I didn't think Daryl Sutter was the right hire. It's not necessarily I think that he's the wrong hire. I don't think the dismissal of Jeff Ward has done anything. They had a nice bump with him, and they won 3. Then they were 4-1. They're now, 4-3 or 4-4 under Daryl. Those are devastating losses. They're certainly not out of it yet, because the Montreal Canadiens, who they're chasing, at some point between now and the end of the season, which will likely be extended a week, doesn't matter, it does appear right now as if the mandate is still to get 56 games in, meaning that the Canadiens still have a handful of games left against the Senators, and even when the Senators are playing terrible, they give the Habs all they can handle. So, mind you, the other teams will too. Look at this, okay, for an example. You look at last night, Vancouver just got walked by Winnipeg again. And the Canucks are in that chase as well, right? They're actually closer to Montreal, but they've played even more games than Calgary has. But they got walked last night. And the Sens just aren't really getting walked by anybody. Now, I'm saying that, and maybe they waltz in against the Leafs here tonight and get run over. They played last night. But the Leafs, here's the Leafs again in another game where they haven't played in a bunch of days. And what we've seen so far, again, not huge sample sizes, but what we've seen so far is teams that are coming off multiple days layoff don't generally have a good showing. So you've got that, meaning the Sens, who played last night, didn't really expand a lot of energy. Like, they're getting great goaltending. Again, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this kid's 2-0. Got Jack Campbell in Toronto Leaf net, who's 4-0. He hasn't allowed a goal in 2 games, so irresistible force meeting the immovable object tonight. You got to figure it's going to end up a 3-point game. But the point I want to make is Ottawa isn't rolling over against anybody. And there's a lot of really nice pieces there that are fitting in. Most importantly, though, they're getting some goaltending. and which they didn't have at all through most of the early part of the season. Even when Matt Murray turned around, he then regressed for a couple games again, cost him some losses. If and ands, and the old story, if your aunt had this, you'd be your uncle. I mean, it's the fact remains is that it is what it is. You would have maybe won some games then, you turn around, you lose some games. They're playing very loose right now. It's an easy time of year. We've seen this historically for years in the NHL. Teams that either think or are virtually no hope of making the playoffs. Where's the stress? And they're playing pretty loose, and you could see that last night. So, and Calgary, I mean, look, I'll just keep reiterating what I've been saying all along. I had them pegged to miss the playoffs from the start of the year. Maybe they still make it. Prove me wrong. But they are one of the lowest scoring teams in the league. And sometimes you can get a little skewed with a couple of wins against a team that is scoring as little as you are. And at the end of the day, it's two non-playoff teams in what I feel is the weakest division. So it is what it is. Ottawa's a handful right now, and I just don't see them rolling over and going out, coming anytime soon, like I saw Vancouver do last night. So a little early for my whiskey just yet. But anyway, I was going to talk something about the Buffalo Sabres, but I want to shut it down. I want to do my plug here on AAA Cav Tech Automotive. So this is an operation run now by a friend of mine. He was ahead of me and Rod Brown at St. Pius by a year or two. His name's Donnie Kavanaugh, and just a prince of a man. As I said, one of the many star athletes at Pius in the 70s. We were an absolute sports factory that decade and beyond, even into the 80s and 90s with a number of other sports. But for us, we're very proud of our affiliation and association and the time that we spent at that school. And Donnie Kavanaugh, the owner of AAA Cav Tech Automotive, is part of that alumni, proud member. And in terms of his automotive experience, like some of the others we've promoted, this is a man who comes by it honestly. His father, you go so far as to say, was a legend in the automotive industry for both the length of time that he operated Cecil's Esso on Smythe Road, if I'm not mistaken, it was called, for decades. He's no longer with us, but this is the environment that Donnie grew up in. So now he has the operation at 37 Edgewater, and as Reese Richards, one of the many top salesmen at Hosie and Brown Automotive, like to point out to me, 37 Edgewater, Liam, is right in behind Darcy McGee's Irish Pub in Canada. So there you go, folks. You want to bring your vehicle in to AAA Cav Tech Automotive and get any one of a myriad of jobs, because they, like the others, do full body, every single thing imaginable. Slide in the car, hit Darcy McGee's, get a couple in you, come back and pick it up. They'll give you a call and you can just walk right over. It's a piece of cake. But yeah, they are a full body, 2 great bays there, if I'm not mistaken. They also are another of the garages that will specialize or can specialize in the older models, your fixer-upper, the car that you have maybe painstakingly worked on over the years. They also are very able-bodied to work on any of those types of vehicles as well. They do the full safeties. They take cars with warranties. They do the new cars. You know, a lot of people think when you buy from a dealership, you automatically have to stay there forever. No, you don't. You can go to your favorite local garage. And believe me, AAA Cav Tech Automotive have become, for many, 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 many people, their favorite local garage. And rightfully so for the work that they do. They also have their honesty and integrity motto. And something else that I like is they stress that they back all that, including all of the service and parts that they install. And when you say parts, and you're talking automotive parts, that brings you right back to Hosie and Brown Automotive, because they supply the parts to AAA Cav Tech. See, we're all a family, and it all started in Pius in the 70s. How do you beat it? So give my buddy Donnie some love there, and drop in at 37 Edgewater and check him out. Trannies, brakes, oil changes, safeties, you name it, they do it all. and they do a fantastic job on it. So thanks for that, and thank you to Hosie and Brown, of course, for the sponsorship. The shot, as we finish up here, little birthday shot out here to 3 individuals celebrating one who would have been gone a long time, and that's Bill Barilko. Bill Barilko was born on this day. He's the man who died tragically in the plane crash in 1951. His remains were not discovered until June 7th, 1962, which was the next year the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup. He had been a Stanley Cup winning defenseman for the Leafs and went on that fishing trip, all from the tragically hip song 50 Mission Cap, sung so eloquently and excellently by Canadian music icon Gord Downie and the band. And Gord, of course, no longer with us either. So to Bill Barilko and Jean Potvin, who's sadly in having major health issues right now. His birthday today, God love him. So think of him today. If you happen to know any of the Potvin family, he is, of course, the brother to Denny. And more closer to home, although Jean Potvin's from the area as well, but a man I do know quite well, I want to offer a big toast to Ted Bulley. It's Ted Bulley's birthday today. I got to know Ted so well. Wore number 29, tough as nails, outstanding two-way winger, power forward before the term was even used in the late 70s, primarily for the Chicago Blackhawks, played a little bit in Washington and Pittsburgh, but former Hull Festival, a dear friend of mine, and his birthday today as well. So on behalf of all 3 of those gentlemen, of course, CavTech, AAA CavTech Automotive, thank Ad Seal Services, my buddy Mark Cullen, for the shot of whiskey. And I'll bring you some more specs on Ottawa Valley uniforms, bar, tavern, t-shirt next show if you want one. I'll talk to Kevin and see what we got for that. Everybody stay safe, be well, and we'll talk to you very soon in a couple of days. G'day.